So if we take a 10,000 foot view of what we're dealing with, we were discussing the percentages earlier. So there's a range of questions, right? So we knew this in our kickoff meeting as well, that sections 1 and sections 4, section 1 and 4 have the lion's share, right? So 21 to 32 questions, 21 to 32 questions, right? Section 1 has 3 subsections, right? And section 4 has 2 subsections, right? So preparation for section number 1, some students found it a little bit challenging. They're coming from FE, right? Where the reference handbook is your solid guide, right? It is that literally a guide with which you can, what are the topics, and you can, if you want to, dig a little bit deeper and maybe to an extent also rely on plug and chug. That's not the case with PE Power. It's an advanced exam. It requires you to go deeper, and then it's furthermore complicated by the fact that right up front, the first topic that you want to study, instrument transformers, right, they're not there. Okay, so it's sort of a good realization, good shock in some sense. So general power engineering, it seems forever to complete this section, right? Both in my on-demand course, even in the reference handbook, and even when we are doing the live trainings, I think it took us 3 weeks or something like that to complete general power engineering, right? So it's very slow pace because we are trying to handle a lot of disconnected topic, right? Which have little overlap between them, okay? And that is consistent with how I feel electrical preparation is, that pretty much every section is sort of disconnected. But once we are over it, right, and we start getting into some interesting discussion with codes and standards at the end, we get into section number 2. And in section number 2, this is where you guys see a momentum that is building. Things that you're learning, really true. You are able to do calculations. You get able to get your hands dirty with the formulas, right? And the equivalent circuits sort of do come into play over here, at least if you look at the circuits for power electronics and so on and so forth. But then you also get a realization that PE Power Exam is very different from FE Electrical, right? Because these concepts are a lot more advanced per unit. Most of you who have taken power systems in undergraduate have done per unit to some extent, right? And similarly with symmetrical components. But I've had so many students who've told me after going through my program, after going through these sections, that is the first time ever that I've been able to make sense of per unit, that I've been able to make sense of symmetrical components. Before going through this, right, it was just like trying to fit variables, parameters, and a bunch of equations, hoping that your answers are going to match. But once you realize why we have zones, actually, even before that, why do we need per unit, right? Primarily because of transformers. The voltages are changing in different zones, and it's not that easy to sort of accommodate a square root 330 degrees delta y for every, even if it's a radial system, from one zone to another zone, always flipping between line current, phase current, and this and that. So that was basically the reason that we have per unit. And once you realize that whatever you're doing is not meaningless, it's not senseless, it has a true application, true reason, I guess that most of us are able to relate to it a little bit better. And that's what the students tell me about per unit. And for symmetrical components, just when you look at the unbalanced, phasors, and then when you look at the positive, negative, and zero sequence, which are perfectly balanced, at least within their own realm, right? And then you combine them together, and you're able to get these vectors, right? That is a sort of eye-opening moment for a lot of students. And then they realize, okay, there is some reason why we do these, right? It's not just to put yourselves through the torture and do the math, right? And it does make a comeback in fault analysis. So section number 2, guys, in the study guide as well, when you go through it, start paying extra attention. Over here, you're just mostly concerned with not making any unforced error, okay? Not making any unforced error, understanding the question and dealing with it, right? While being comfortable with the disconnectedness, and don't know even if it's a word, but by the disjointed nature of the topics, right? These are the challenges you have in general power engineering. And then NEC is a different world in itself, and FPA 70E and all of that stuff. But for the first two, the challenges are very different. It's not necessarily that the concepts are advanced or difficult to grasp. It's just that you have to be comfortable with a little bit of random stuff. But over here, you have to be paying attention to the fine details. And that basically is never gonna reduce. That expectation will only increase in section 3 and in section number 4. For some of them, they're very algorithmic, right? And that's why practice does help, right? but meaningless practice can also give you false sense of confidence. Now, I'm very glad those of you who have actually been attending throughout this session. And one comment that I did make, right, because I have archived all of my previous live training sessions as well. I did notice at least on average a 30-minute increase in every session, right? For this round of group of students. And you guys really internalized my recommendation, adopted it and put it to use when I said that, guys, PE Power, we need to go in depth, right? And you guys were asking questions both during live session and after live session. Kept me super busy, by the way. I'm really looking forward to a little bit of a break now, but kept me super busy, right? With tons of high quality questions, right? And that tells me that, you were not just looking at the questions and solutions. You guys were asking a lot of whys. And that's why the average timeline of all of my sessions really increased by at least 30 minutes. And for the upcoming September to November classes, I'm actually going to say 10 a.m. EST to 1 p.m. EST, because if the second group is same, then I have to tell my students up front that these are not 2.5 hour long classes on Saturdays and Sundays. These are 3 hour long sessions, right? Which people won't mind. And yeah, anyway, so that tells me that when we were going through these sections, you guys were thinking about how the same question can be asked, right? Why did we do this? Why did we do that, right? So that is the right approach for section number 3 and section number 4, okay? So lion's share, section 4 and section 1, very different in nature. In section number 1, we are really learning what we disconnected, and in section number 4, everything comes together. You're talking about power factor, we're talking about, voltage regulation, voltage drop and everything. So it really makes a lot of sense at that stage. So this is a strategic review of the exam specification.